Today on Locked On Red Wings, MBN and ASP make their North American debuts, and expectedly, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. Also, Scotty has a huge head.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. I am your host, Brian Fisher. Scotty is off today. He is out doing Easter things, which gives me a perfect opportunity to get him back for all the times he said I was bald while I was on my honeymoon. So I'm going to make the most of the next 25 or so minutes. Of course, though, we have Red Wings adjacent content to talk about as well, as ASP and MBN both made their North American debuts, their AHL debuts, and I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag. And I'll break down the games as a whole, too, because I thought it was a mixed bag for the Griffins as well. I don't think they played particularly great in either of these games, but they did enough to clinch that third seed and a bye to the divisional round. So I'll break all that down on this episode. But first, I got to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I'm not going to waste your guys' time, right? You're here to hear about MBN, Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, and Axel Sandin-Pellikka. And also, as an aside, I'm sorry if my voice might sound a little weird. I'm also getting over a little bit of a cold, which I assume that I got on the flight back from Hawaii. So if I sound a little bit funny, or I'm short of breath, or I'm taking lots of sips, that is why. So please just bear with me for the next 25 or so minutes. Anyways, I liked a lot of what I saw from both those guys, but I also could see the cracks. And to be honest, a lot of that was to be expected to some degree. Scotty and I talked about it on Friday. The idea that these two guys would come over to North American ice, given where they were drafted, they weren't top 10 draft picks or anything, and just light the world on fire, I thought that was a haughty expectation. These are middle round guys who, had good seasons on a bigger sheet of ice, but this is a faster game. This is a more physical game in North America. And as well, it's a smaller sheet of ice. And that really comes into play with these European players. And it takes them a year or two or more for some, and some never get used to it at all, to adjust. Now, I think both these guys are going to adjust in due time. Probably not going to take them that long either, especially because they have this entire playoff run to play as well. But I did think it impacted their ability to make plays because it impacts the way you see the ice. And I thought that was especially true leading off with Axel Sandin-Pellikka. I thought he had probably the most extreme spectrum of good and bad in these two hockey games. In the offensive zone, on the power play especially, he looked unbelievable. He was everything that you asked for, everything that you were sold. He was fantastic at cycling the puck. He knew when to drop down a little bit lower to get mixed in with the offense. That offensive IQ, that vision, that is the Axel Sandin-Pellikka that we were sold on. That's the guy we knew. But the question coming in was, can Axel Sandin-Pellikka play defense? He's a little bit of an undersized guy coming in at just under 6 foot, and he's less than 200 pounds. Can a guy like that play solid defense? And yeah, there are guys in the league, right? We talked about it last week. His floor might be Shane Gostisbehere, and that's not a bad floor to be, right? A guy who is specifically your power play one guy. He's going to get sheltered third pair minutes, get offensive zone deployments. He's going to get you a lot of points, but you're not going to put him in the D zone. That's not a bad thing. We had our gripes with Shane Gostisbehere, but we never complained about his offensive output. He was really good at that. So if that's his floor, that's solid. But in the defensive zone in these first two games, I thought he really struggled. I think it was the first goal, the Gavin Hayes goal. It may have been the Zach Sanford goal, because both of these goals blend together. Against the Rockford Ice Hogs, he was put on a little bit of a blender, and granted, it was a 2-on-1, but I don't think he played it particularly well. And then in the second game, he took a defensive zone penalty, a tripping, too. I did not think that he looked necessarily strong in front of the net. I don't think he was reading the opponent's offensive setups particularly well, and he certainly was struggling along the boards to win board battles. But those are things that we expected. By no means is that a call to sound the alarm on Axel Sandin-Pellikka. He was again, you saw the extremes of what he can do and what he still has to work on in this first 2 North American professional hockey games. The upsides to both these players are still so incredibly high that I don't have really that much of a worry about how they play in their first 2 American Hockey League games. So it's just things you notice and you go, okay, very clearly, like, the adjustment to being over here is going to take a second. Again, it might take 2 games. They might be good to go. Might take into next offseason, or into next season, rather. But it's something to watch. It's first blush, and that's what this is. It's a first reaction. MBN, I thought he was a little bit more in the middle. I didn't think he necessarily wowed me at any points, but he never at any point did anything that made me go, oh, that was a bad play. The one play he did that stood out to me came at the end of the second period, I want to say, against the Iowa Wild, where with time, actually, it might have been, I think it was actually against Rockford, because it was right after that Watson went after Comesso, the goaltender, and that whole after the period brawl that ended up getting Bouillon and Johansson suspended began. But off the faceoff, he got the puck in the high slot, and he ripped it. And it was a rip. And that is the shot that you were sold on with Michael Brandsegg-Nygard. Comesso made the save. I think time expired regardless, so even if he didn't, I don't think it would have been a good goal. But it was still like, okay, that's the thing you want. Again, I do still think Michael Brandsegg-Nygard has a better chance of adjusting faster to North American ice because of how he plays the game. It's a much more physical, in the corners, winning those board battles games. I think the smaller ice will benefit him. I think initially he'll struggle because these guys are stronger over here. They're bigger, they're more physical. But as he adjusts, I think he'll do just fine. I just really think that the upside to both these players is still really barely seen. And that's what we have yet to look at, and it's too early to tell. But first reactions, I thought both of these guys had mixed results. I thought they had upside in both their games. I don't think the downside was, obviously the ASP defensive zone stuff, it was tough, but it's not something you can't fix, right? Again, it's just so early. By no means is there any reason to panic, just my first reaction on both these things. So as we head towards segment 2 here, we'll talk more about the games at large between the Rockford Ice Hogs. That was a 4-1 loss, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah, 4-1 loss, and then a 2-1 shootout win over the Iowa Wild that clinched them the 3rd seed in the Central Division. We'll break down both those games, and honestly, I thought those games kind of mirrored the performances we saw out of the rookies making their debut. It was a little bit of a mixed bag. So we will go to break. When we return, we will cover those 2 games. Stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Going to talk to you guys today about Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. I myself have had the pleasure to go to one against the 2014 series against the Boston Bruins and the 2015 series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. 1 loss, 1 win, but despite that, the intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Here's what you're going to love about Game Time. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concert, theater, and so much more. Their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you panoramic seat views so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss assurance, or their 24-hour return guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast, Monday edition, as Nolan Bianchi used to lovingly call it here on the podcast. Griffins went 1-1 in this weekend series to wrap up the regular season and clinch the third seed. That is giving them a divisional round, a bye to the divisional round. That's a best-of-5 series, and it'll be against the Texas Stars. That, I believe, starts, let me double-check here, on the 29th of April. I'll double-check a little bit later because I don't want to keep you guys, unless I can find it quick here, keep you guys waiting around. I'm not trying to milk this too bad for you guys. So yes, next game starts on April 29th at 7 o'clock. That is going to be a home game for the Grand Rapids Griffins. I imagine that's because they are the lower seed, so they'll play the first 2 at home and then play the next 3 on the road to finish out the series. This game, the first game we're going to talk about against the Rockford Ice Hogs, was a mess for the Grand Rapids Griffins. It was a sloppy game from start to finish. I thought they showed some life early on. In fact, shot counts reflect that. They had 10 shots in the first period, 8 for Rockford. But honestly, it really devolved from there. A lot of what I was talking about with some good offensive looks, I struggle to say they had strong offensive looks. They had some good puck movement, but in the defensive zone, just as a team, struggling to get that puck out. In transition, up out of the zone, a lot of turnovers. Sounds familiar, right? A lot of the Red Wings players struggled with that a lot this season as well. And Gavin Hayes scored in the second. Zach Sanford also scored in the second. That gave the Ice Hogs a 2-0 lead, and honestly, it just devolved from there. The Griffins got in a lot of early and often penalty trouble. Sheldon Dries, Austin Watson, Michael Brandsegg-Nygard, all 2-minute minors in the first. Joe Snively, Dominic Shine, Austin Watson. These are all 2-minute minors before we get to the good stuff. And then it fully unraveled in the end of the second when I think Watson was trying to reap retribution for when Kosa got ran earlier in the period accidentally by a Rockford player that briefly had him on the ground in pain. He played through it and he played the rest of the game, but Watson, being the player he is, sticking up for his friend, kind of went after, it looked like, it might have been Shine, looked like he was trying to get to Comesso as this is what you get. Somebody who saw the replays, watching on Flow Sports, it can be a little, you don't see that many replays of the event. I was just going based on what I saw immediately. But a brawl broke out. Not a brawl in the sense that people were dropping gloves, but everybody had a body. Everybody was trying to fight, and the refs did their darndest to keep the gloves on and no actual punches thrown. I kind of wish they didn't. As a fan, I would have loved to see a full-line brawl because as a fan, that's like one of the most exciting things you can see in a hockey game. But I understand why they did not do that. And, Dominic Shine earlier in the game got a unsportsmanlike conduct and a cross-checking penalty in back-to-back sequences. He took a hit he took exception to and tried to get retribution. The player he was against did not get a penalty, so he did not want to engage, so he got a double minor with those 2 penalties I just listed. So that was the start, but it was that unraveling at the end of the second that really happened. And honestly, yeah, there was some, they were calling a lot on the Griffins, but it's not as if they weren't calling anything on Rockford Ice either. I feel like a lot of these penalties were self-inflicted wounds, and that really comes to attention when you have Shai Buyum and Anton Johansson leave the bench after the final buzzer and get engaged in the scrum, which is automatic game misconduct. You're kicked out for the game, leaving the Griffins with 4 defensemen, making the uphill battle in the third period when you're already down 2-0 even worse. And then also, I think it's an automatic suspension. It doesn't matter if it's automatic or not. They got suspended. So then you didn't have, that defensive pairing available to you in your season finale against the Iowa Wild, which you did ultimately win. But the principle of it is you are never supposed to leave the bench and get engaged in a scrum because all you do at that point is hurt your team. You're not on the ice. You don't do it. So that really disappointed me to see as somebody who covers hockey. Again, as a fan, I'm like, yeah, let the fists fly. It's going to be fun. But the penalty woes continued into, actually pretty much ended there for the Griffins in that game. I'm bleeding together with Iowa. The penalty troubles against Iowa, they had 4, which isn't terrible. But again, just playing a cleaner game of hockey, which when you have Dominic Shine and Austin Watson. And I love the game they bring. I'm not necessarily nitpicking that role they play, because Austin Watson's also a great point producer for the Griffins as well down there at the AHL level. But there's a time and a place. And I thought in the Rockford Ice Hogs game, they went a little bit too far in the enforcer role, and I thought it ultimately hurt this team. Not that the team was playing a strong game regardless, right? I mentioned the defensive struggles. Offensively, too, they weren't playing a great hockey game. They really struggled, and this continued into Iowa as well. They were fantastic cycling the puck high. The passing between the defenseman and the center who cycles up top, that was great. They constantly held on the puck, but they struggled to get it into the dangerous areas in the middle of the zone. Just a lot of just kind of sending it there, hoping somebody would get it, and it getting swatted away for no offense. Their lone goal against Rockford came on the power play, and that was Axel Sandin-Pellikka's first AHL point. It was a primary assist on Amadeus Lombardi's 19th goal of the season, came that close to the 20-goal benchmark. So that was definitely the highlight of that game, but unfortunately it kind of got buried in the penalty woes. So there's a lot to say about the Rockford Ice Hogs game. I thought that the penalty woes were much better reeled in against Iowa, but I think that their offense, their quality offense, still continued to struggle into that second game, which became a must-win situation because they had the Chicago Wolves tailing them, who fortunately lost on Friday night, to keep the Griffins 2 points ahead. But if the Griffins failed to get a single point and the Wolves got 2, the Wolves would then get the 3 seed, and the Griffins would have to play the play-in round, which is that 3-game series they played last year, I believe, against Rockford. So it became an imperative game for them to win, and I thought they came out slow in the first period. The second and the third, they were playing with more intensity, but again, I still think they struggled to generate quality offense. And I think that's something we have heard from Andrew for the entirety of the second half of the season. Every time we have him on, he goes, yeah, as great as they were playing in the first half, they were in the first place in the division. They had, I wouldn't call it a comfortable lead, but they were in first place. And then they just stopped being able to score goals. And that happened again. Like, there was a large part when Iowa scored first, I went, are we going to lose this game 1-0? Thankfully, Sheldon Dries, with 24 goals on the season, played a little bit of hero with an assist from Dominic Shine and Amadeus Lombardi again to tie it up from a shot about the top of the circle, if I'm recalling correctly, to tie it up in the third period, 1-1. They carried that into the overtime, and that 1 point clinched them third in the division. They only needed the 1 point in that game, and they ultimately won it in the shootout. Nate Danielson with an absolutely stellar move in the shootout to inevitably clinch it. It wasn't the clinching goal at the time, but it did end up Axel Sandin-Pellikka also getting an opportunity in the shootout. Just ended up kind of mishandling the puck, but still cool to see him and even MBN get a look on the power play as well. They're getting responsibility right off rip. The coach, with 2 games left, wanted to see what they could have, what they could add, believe they could add offense. And again, ASP had an assist, I think, in due time. MBN will as well. So it's still very cool to see them play. It was still very cool to see, Emmett Finney, Andre Betcher, Sebastian Kosa, all those guys play. And on the note of Sebastian Kosa, I thought he was okay. He made some really good saves. I don't think he was lights out, but no goalie is going to be lights out every single game. Again, he let in, I think, was it 3 goals, the fourth one being an empty netter. Yeah, third one being an empty netter, fourth one rather, on 32 shots. So that's over a 900 save percentage in that hockey game. So he did enough to give his team a chance to win. It's definitely not on his shoulders. I thought it was just a solid performance. It was nothing to write home about. But on the other side of this break, I do want to praise Jack Campbell, who I thought was absolutely stellar in the second half of that back-to-back in Iowa. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? I certainly didn't. Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required, just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With Wi-Fi 6/6E and auto low latency mode advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gaming with lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV-LockedOn to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, the 1st and 2nd Gen of the Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and the 3rd Gen of Fire TV Cube. Give me 1 second here. The worst part about being sick and having your throat all messed up is the little voice cracks your voice does. It's like going through second puberty. It's awful. Anyways, segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. If you've made it this far, you are a trooper because, man, I just talk. It's incredible. Jack Campbell, I thought, was really good against the Iowa Wild. He only allowed 1 goal in that game on 32 shots. And most notably, he made 3 crazy saves in OT, the first 2 of which were like Rolly the goalie type saves, or Dominic Hasek type saves, where he's just rolling on his back, stacking the pads, and then he rolled over and did it again to make the second save, got back into his stance, and made a 3rd save on a shot before the Griffins were able to clear it in overtime. It looked like the game was over. And granted, the Griffins' fate was already sealed. They clinched that third spot in the division with that point, getting to overtime, but they were still playing for pride, right? You want to win. You want to spoil the home finale, the fan appreciation night for the Iowa Wild, and Jack Campbell was absolutely incredible. Honestly, as would be expected, this is a guy who has a ton of NHL experience, Michigan native, going down to the AHL, kind of like Ville Husso, right? He excelled. Not to try and take away his performance, but throughout the game, he was making big save after big save, being exactly where he needed to be at all times. And this is a guy I would be wholly comfortable with bringing back as Costa's backup next year, right? You look at the situation, you know Trey Augustine's going back to NCAA, you're going to need a backup. So your option here is, okay, maybe Guimond, right? That's the guy's name who's, or Carter Gielander. Those are a couple of guys you have in your prospect pool who are goaltenders. You also have Jan Bednar down in the ECHL, who's come up and had a cup of coffee in the AHL a time or two. But if you really want to lock down and have a vet, like if Jack Campbell's willing to continue an AHL role as maybe an emergency call-up, that seems like a match made in heaven. So if they re-sign Jack Campbell at a league minimum NHL deal, I don't see the downside in that, of course, unless you want to promote another goaltender, but you know your best goaltending prospect outside of Costa is going back to the NCAA, so maybe that's the best option. I'm 100% comfortable with that being the play that you make. But going into the playoffs, right, their playoff run, they're going against the Texas Stars, rather, on the 29th, whatever day the 29th is. Let me check. It's probably like a Friday or a Saturday. Oh my goodness, it is a Tuesday. They're starting a playoff series on a Tuesday, but there's a lot of travel, so that makes sense. Be prepared, by the way. AHL teams, they travel by bus, so home games are going to be like 29, the 1st, the 3rd. Then the away games are going to be like a week later, because there's a lot of travel in between. That was the case last year, a lot of days off between games. But the Texas Stars were a pretty solid team this year. They finished 2nd in the Central Division. They were a solid team last year. They're led on the standings-wise by Maverick Bork, 77 points in 71 games. Matej Blumel, 62 and 72. And, well, not Logan Stankoven anymore. He's no longer with the Texas Stars. So 3rd would be then Curtis McKenzie, 48 and 63. And goaltender-wise, Matthew Murray's got a save percentage of .896, and Remy Poirier has a .904 save percentage himself. Of course, Matthew Murray is indicated as inactive, so I'm not sure on his status for the series next. That starts not this weekend, but the following Tuesday. But that's just a quick glance at the team that you're going to be facing, that the Griffins are going to be facing in the playoffs. The Stars finished the season with 43 wins and 26 losses, 3 of which in overtime, 9 points above where the Griffins played. So in those last 2 games, they really had no chance of catching. Well, they didn't really have no chance. They just had no chance. Looking ahead for the rest of the week, right, when Scotty is back, because the Griffins are off, we'll start off with some off-season content. We'll be talking about the player interviews. We're not going to do, especially because the Red Wings did them all in one day, that actually makes our lives a little easier. It's stuff we should cover because it's content, and sometimes they say interesting things, but it's also not the most interesting stuff in the world. A lot of players do that players speak to the media. It doesn't really allow you a lot. So we'll focus on the quotes that the players said that were the most interesting. Most notably, guys like Dylan Larkin mentioning how he was hurt after Four Nations. So we'll talk about our thoughts on Four Nations. Andrew Kopp mentioning that the other guys in the locker room didn't do enough. Andrew Kopp, by the way, always the best guy on the team for talking to the media. So honest, so gives you good quotes. But talking about how other guys down the lineup did not do enough to support Raymond and Larkin when they were not at their best. And of course, Patrick Kane saying there was mutual interest in a return, which is huge, and I would be down for, and I'll explain why on Tuesday's episode when Scotty is back. That's going to be about it for me here on this solo episode of Locked on Red Wings. Scotty still has a massive head. He has to custom order his hats because his head is so big. And we do bald. So we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. It's your team every day.